Sam, you ready?
Yes.
I call the Charlottesville City Council meeting of November the 3rd, 2025 to order. Before we begin, I know that it's a very fluid situation, what's happening over at the University of Virginia. We may be getting information as the meeting goes on, so we will carry on with this meeting with heavy hearts and uncertainty, but prayers and thoughts with the first responders and the families. So we will go on with our business best we can. The Charlottesville meeting will come to order. Ms. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Councilor Ostrand?
Here.
Councilor Payne isn't here yet. Vice Mayor Pinkston?
Here.
Councilor Snook?
Here.
Mayor Wade?
Here. We thought we may have to make an adjustment to the agenda for the regular business meeting, but we believe that David Blunt, which had an item on number 8, will be here on time. So we're going to continue with the regular agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda in second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please say no. Thank you. The meeting will be divided into 3 sections. The first one will be a work session where we will talk and not take a vote. And the second, we will go into closed session or recess, and then we will have our regular business meeting at 6:30. We have 2 reports today. One is from KYIP, and then discussion on zoning regulation and current planning and zoning work plan priorities. So is KYIP, Ms. Ragland, are you presenting? Thank you.
Got to bring this all the way down. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor Wade, City Council members. Thank you all for this opportunity. My name is Latara Ragland, and I have the fortunate opportunity to serve as the KYIP Program Coordinator. And let me just say, I am a little nervous because I'm used to watching from home.
Yeah.
And let me just be honest about that. But through and through, very thrilled and fortunate to be in this role here at the City of Charlottesville, Department of Human Services, through Community Attention, Community-Based Services. And tonight, I'm going to do my best to present to you the great impacts that you all already know that KYIP serves here in our community for our youth, our work as a department, and personally and professionally. This program just really pulls on our heartstrings each and every session that we have in Youth After Youth. And so tonight I'll be spending some time just presenting about summer 2025. And do I just click this to go to the next? Yay, I did it. Okay. So one of the tasks that our counselors get to do is take pictures of our interns while they are on site and in session. You all already have a report, and this was the cover of that. And so I just wanted to share that for everybody as well. Again, these are interns that get to have an opportunity to be on site working hands-on with our site partners that we cultivate as a staff. And so as we go through the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about how we get to that part. So again, this is a Community Attention Youth Internship Program with the City of Charlottesville, Department of Human Services. And we like to say empowered youth, engaged community as our thought process around the work. So there's 4 main goals that KYIP has held true to since 2007. We are almost at 20 years doing this, y'all. So that is celebratory in all itself. So goal number 1 is really to workplace readiness, getting our young people 14 to 21 into career paths, working hands-on here in our community, and working towards resiliency, helping them identify and magnify their own skills that they already have. And so, we do that by the point of interviewing them. We do that by interest inventories and celebrating their resiliency when they get to graduation and saying, look, you did this, and holding up their resume to highlight the things that they're already doing and things that they get to add to their resume. Goal number 3 is networking and mentorship. Again, we are partnering them with people here in our community already, and sites and with their CAEP counselors, connecting them to positive adults and resources in the community. And then community engagement. Some of our youth do not realize that we have all of these rich resources here in our community, so they get connected to a site that they may not even know exists. So that is a great opportunity not only for that young person, but also that site supervisor to engage with them. And so those are the main 4 goals that have been in existence and that we keep just pressing. And then I also just want to share some data around where our summer 2025 started. So we had 265 total applications received. And every one of those applications, interns received an interview. No, I did not do those by myself. This wonderful human services staff, we all come together and help do those interviews. But every single one of those applicants get an interview, because that's part of the process. Really just giving them that opportunity to know what it feels like to be interviewed, the application process. And then 150 interns were accepted. 73 of those were city scholarships, and then 93 site placements. 93 sites were cultivated for the summer, and we were able to place those 150 youth into those 93 sites. And so what that really looks like is that there's sites that are taking multiple interns. And that's really what we're striving for this coming summer, is having more of those placements, because what we're finding out is that our youth are learning from each other. Our youth are wanting to be with each other. And sites are also able to do that easier, more of a group setting than it is one-on-one. We ended up with a 98% success rate, and that's been relatively the case over the last few years. I think when we set ourselves up in the beginning, when we're like, all right, this is a commitment from you intern, from you parent, from you site supervisor, we're looking at the end result being like, they're ensuring that they have the time, that they have the commitment, that they're serious about seeing it through. And we were able to see that 11 of the interns were able to be offered employment in the end. And we, as CAEP, do not have anything to do with that. We just like to hear about it and celebrate with our interns when that happens. But it is a beautiful thing when our sites are like, we want to hold on to this person and we want to offer them a job. And they still, some sites will keep on hosting interns. But we also learned that in this summer that there are also interns that are earning certificates, and we want to hone in on that. So that looks like the Serve Safe certificates, they're earning CPR first aid, they're earning Python, all these things that could have been happening in the past that we just really haven't been magnifying. So that's one of the things that we really want to go into in these next sessions, and the summer session, just really looking at taking a closer look into. And I talk fast, sorry.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
When you say 98% success rate, that means like
Went
people
too fast.
completing their internships? 98% of them
Yes.
have done the whole thing? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
And that's 6 weeks in the summer. 6 weeks, 20 hours a week, 1 week vacation. So they are saying, I'm only going to miss 5 days. And we do give them 2 days that they can, play around with, get some earned money, but really is sacrificing. And that's for them and their family. So. Thinking about the demographic data for the summer, it's very similar to last year, just kind of like comparing, still very similar to where we were. And just to kind of give a background, we are still only actively recruiting in the city schools. That's Charlottesville High School and Charlottesville Middle. I did that right. And so, if you're wondering about the makeup, we are partnering with Star Hill Pathways, so some of that demographics will come from that group, but solely our recruitment is in the Charlottesville City Schools. So we don't, we do the job fair there, we do the lunches, and that is leading up to summer. And then also, as far as demographics, we obviously will share information with Boys and Girls Club and Big Brothers Big Sisters, like a lot of the nonprofit agencies, and like Region 10 and our DSS, like all of those partners get the information as well. I just want to pause here. I've been thinking a lot about our site partners, and the reason for this is 93 site partners is not easy work, and mainly because of the maintenance. So they are volunteer, so none of them get paid to host an intern. And the sacrifice that they make to say that they're going to mentor a young person, provide meaningful tasks, that's big. Not just come and like sit and, you know, wipe down a few tables. Like all those things are important for some of the work, right? But meaningful tasks, like that's a big commitment. And for where we are right now, you know, it's hard when we have to say goodbye to a business, or when we have to say, or even when a business has to say, like, I just don't have the time right now. Can you ask me in the spring, or can you ask me next summer? So I really just want to give space and honor the fact that these businesses, some of them keep showing up every session. So we offer 4 school year sessions in the summer. Some of them say yes every session, and some of them are just like, I can only do it during the summer. And that in itself is still just a beautiful thing. So this is 93 sites, and our city of Charlottesville sites keep growing. So whatever y'all are doing, keep doing that, because we need it. We need it. I feel like this is why we have a program, right? We don't have our sites, we don't have our interns, we don't have a program. So really and truly, it is giving them that honor. And I try, it's hard. We don't have money to pay them, but the fact that they keep showing up anyway is just amazing. So just giving them that space to, you know, and some of them have dual roles. Some of them are parents and a site supervisor. Some of them are like, wait, I need to give back because you all gave my child a space in the program. So yes, I have a space here as a site supervisor to do that. So we get to hold on to that too. All right. For those of you who know me, I get a little emotional. I'm trying not to do that right now. All right, let me keep going. So the KIPP experience. For those of you who got to spend time with us, raise your hand this summer. Yes. 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 I love it. Payne, did you? Yes. Yes. Raise your hands. It was awesome, right? Sometimes we get voluntold to do things. No, I'm joking.
A little bit.
It just gets put on your calendar. But no, the KIPP experience is one that if you have not yet been a part of, we welcome it. We will find a spot for you. And it is really because our youth deserve it. And one thing that we challenge them to think about is just showing up with a growth mindset and with their gifts and their talents. So we all have them. And so starting at their application process, like we start asking questions right away about who they are, what they want to do, their identity, their skills, like what have you been doing, share it, all the way through orientation and academy, and just building that up. One of the things that we did for the first time ever was a family night. And so the family night was really to tackle paperwork selfishly on our end. As a department, we were like, wait, we got to get this done ahead of time because our payroll people are like, this is a lot. But it was fun. And one thing that I forgot to mention is like PVC Bollock Center and Carver Rec Center, they always give us space for these wonderful things. But the family night was a great opportunity for families to come. This is before we even did Academy. They came, had dinner with us, and they were able to meet the counselor, meet staff, talk about what exactly was going to happen, and get all their paperwork done. And so just a great opportunity to connect with everybody before they sent their child off on the first day for Academy. And so it just really reinforced the fact that KIPP is a village effort, and that is really what we're trying to do. And that led to that 98% success rate. As far as, I talked about Academy, I'm trying to pick points here. Paychecks are always fun. So paychecks is also an opportunity where we get to celebrate with them. For some interns, this is their very first job. And if you know how we do paychecks here in the city, for our interns, they get a paper check. And so they get to come pick their paper check up from us, and they learn about how to actually apply the financial literacy part that they learned in academy. Like, what does this really mean now that I have all this money? What do I do with all this money? And so we talked through with them about opening a bank account. They did get banking bonuses this summer if they open an account. They talked about just saving and like making sure they don't spend it all on the one thing. So, yep, and so graduation, just having everybody come together for academy and graduation was just really nice to open us and round us out. And our counselor role, like, is so critical. Like, I cannot emphasize this enough about how much they pour into our young people. And, they serve as the mentor, the motivator, the guides, like, just making sure everybody stays together. They're talking to the parent, they're talking to the site supervisor, they're talking to the intern, just making sure that all the pieces are running together. And then meet and greet, that's also a nice spot where the site supervisor and the interns meet for the first time. Coordinating schedules, making sure that everything is going smoothly. So why does KYEP matter now more than ever? I told y'all I watched City Council, and there were a few council meetings ago where there were two young men that came up and talked about wanting to start an entrepreneurship club.
Yes.
And yes, those young men like just are amazing. And I was just like, yeah, because that's pretty much what they've been doing with Troy at Order Up. But also, this weekend, I was washing my car, and one of the kids came up to me and was like, when is the next session? And I'm like, I'm upset because I can't find a towel to dry my car. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, hey. Like, I was expecting him to actually apply the last session. So it's like those moments where it's like, they want this audience of young people that want to work, that want the skill, that want to just be ignited with, give me what I need for the future. And so we are in a unique position here in the city of Charlottesville where we just can like build around these protective factors, the resilience, the belonging, the purpose, and just, we already know all the challenges and the barriers that they're facing. And so I just lift that up for us and know that they have this program here in our city. And these people that want to like pour into them, like I said, even for Academy, nobody gets paid. Everybody comes to speak. We had a beautiful program of people that just wanted to pour into them. And so, we just start there and like give them, opportunities to glean from people. And so I'm here. If you have questions about what all it takes, I'm not gonna bore y'all with all the things. You have, like I said, you have a report in front of you. But one thing, so my call to action. Here we go. And that's us being silly as a staff. We had fun. This was our family night. We had to have fun because, listen, there was a lot of people in that space, and we learned a lot of things afterwards. But my call to action, and I say this at every KYEP presentation. The one thing is to tell a young person that they are good enough and that they are worthy enough for this program and any program that they want to do. And even though it's a no, it's not a never. And really and truly just keep going and keep asking. I have interns that ask all the time, like every session, what about this time? What about that? And I'm just like, why not? And there are so many ways to be a part of the work, y'all. So many ways. Not just you all, but anybody that's listening. So whether that's, in-kind donation, sharing about the work, whether that's the site supervisor or just encouraging someone to be a site partner. But that's all I have. Those are my call to actions. Thank you all for all that you do as a city council, like just continuously pouring into this program and all of our youth programs here in the city.
Ms. Ragland, you did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I understand how you can get passionate about this. Just a quick side, those young men that came, I made sure that I followed up with them, and they have been connected with the superintendent, the principal, and school board to get what they need. So, that is what this community does. We step up for our young people. And I think that this, before I have other counselors to comment on this is one of the most powerful things I think we can do as council, is to pour into our young people, to give them. And before I got on city council and got this crazy schedule, I hosted youth from the KYUP program, and they were amazing. And I could see why it's 98%, because you interviewed me to see what I needed.
Yep.
And you know,
See whether you were good enough.
yes,
Yep,
yeah, well, that was
absolutely.
definitely. But the people, the young ladies that you assigned to me, they came prepared. They knew what to expect. And every week, you all touch base with me and also with the student to make sure, is this working out? Anything needs to be improved upon. Powerful connections and relationships. Many of them I'm still connected with as they're going to college and they're matriculating in the community. So I'm glad that we can do this. The money that we put towards that, we get back tenfold. In a lot of ways we will never see down the road. I forgot all about the paycheck, just kind of getting that at the end of the week or 2 weeks, that I work for this, I earn this. That is so powerful. So thank you. I appreciate you, and I know it's a lot of work. It's really grown, and I can only imagine if each week you reach out to each person, each organization, that's 93 is a lot. I did have a question about,
Well, can I say something real
Yes.
quick? I was going to say this in the beginning, but a fresh 19, 20-year-old Latara actually stepped into the Elmore County office where Mayor Wade worked. And I was like, they told me to come here
Yeah.
because you were going to help me find a job. And it happened.
yes.
It happened.
Well, you were
But-
ODU, right?
Yes.
Yes, you were ready to go. You
But I
were
feel
ready.
like it's a full circle
Yes. So it's good to see you in this position. I've seen you grow over the years, and I'm
Yes.
glad that you're leading this up. I can't think of a better person to do it.
Oh, thank you.
But I'm glad that we have a lot of. A few years ago, it was my understanding that the growth, for the businesses were in a lot of the county places because they have more space. So is that still the case? I'm thinking of retail type of places.
Yeah, so it's been interesting. Most of our sites are actually in the city. And we're working to get county just because of, the youth are sprinkled kind of all over the place. But yeah, most are in the city. If not all at this
Right.
point.
So, Lord, I'll start with you. Did you have any
I
questions?
don't have any questions.
Yeah.
I think it's a cool program.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions, but yeah, thank you for your really excellent work.
Thank you.
I have a leading question. If someone were to want to join the list of site partners, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Please reach out. My information is actually on the website. And yes, they can email me directly. And as Mayor Wade said, we'll sit down, however they want to do it, have some coffee, lunch. We'll just talk it through. But yes, so they can reach out to me directly.
Okay, and there's also a form on the website that they
There
can fill
is,
out.
yep, there's a site perspective form.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you.
Michael?
Yes, and I was at the event, and it was a fantastic event. I think really hit home. We end up having a lot of conversation about the youth in Charlottesville, and what you are all doing is actual, on the ground work to address the conversations that we sometimes have, and to do it, with the youth in our community, not just talking at them, but having them involved as partners. Where the program is right now, are there any kind of resource constraints that you see that could help grow and expand the program, even further? And second question, I know the wages for the youth that participate were set before inflation and a number of other things. Do you hear a lot of feedback, a desire for higher wages for those participating in the program?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first. We do feedback surveys from our youth after each session. And they are relatively positive and happy about the wages. Now, that's not to say, always more money, whatever. But I do think that right now they are happy, especially compared to what other places would ask for. And I think that is where we started, right? Like why we asked for the $15 an hour. And especially without taxes being taken out, all that good stuff. As far as resource constraints, definitely. I mean, I think we are starting to see where, as, obviously the participation, the competitiveness of the program, wanting to increase those numbers, and then we're going to look at space, like all those things, right? So, like, obviously we were talking about, like, the youth, wanting to make sure that we are, reaching everybody as much as possible, so. And we're always talking about that. Like, I don't think I can talk enough about how wonderful my team is, the support. Like, look at them, y'all. They always showing up, always helping out, and just really just rallying behind. So, like, we figure it out, but we will never say no to whatever resources we can have. Right? Right.
And as we're about to formally enter our annual budget process for city council, are there kind of high-impact investments that you've identified that city council could make or consider as part of our, upcoming budget process?
Yes, there have been conversations. I know that for next year, we're looking at 255 total youth that we want to serve, so.
And that's a budget increase of about $150,000, including staff, the hours the staff have to work, and most of the cost goes back out into stipend to the youth.
Okay. Thank you.
And so that was $150,000 for how many more people?
An additional 50 youth.
An additional 50 youth. Okay, thanks.
And that came in the form of a budget request that they provided last week.
Got it.
Any other questions or comments?
Before you close, Mayor, I'll just say to Latara as well as the DHS team, thank you all for the good work that you're doing. This is equity work. This is about opportunity and access. It's very important for us to find ways to invest in our young people. So we'll figure out how to honor the request that they've made for additional funds. Ms. Ragland made sure that she put my arm behind my back in front of all the students and their parents at the closeout meeting. So I feel obligated now to do something about that.
She's good.
Right.
Thank you all so much.
Thank
You
you.
rock. Good job. Yeah. So now we're going to have discussion on the zoning regulation and planning. And Matt, will you be talking about that? And so we will get a presentation. This is just for discussion to give staff some guidance. And as we are discussing this, that we're not getting project or case specific. We're just talking in general now. So as we move forward.
Thank you, Mayor. So Matt Alfley, Development Planning Manager with NDS. I'm joined this evening by Director Kelly Brown, who should be virtual, who will provide, I think she's virtual.
Yeah.
If not, I'll step in for her portion. But tonight, today's presentation will provide an overview of the 2024 Development Code, which guides our residential and mixed-use development. I'll also walk through the zoning framework and key regulatory tools we use to implement the comprehensive plan. As I said, Director Brown will follow up with a deeper dive into the current work plan priorities. The 2024 Development Code is the foundation for how we regulate and use and development within the city. It includes zoning districts, overlay districts, and development standards that reflect the goals of the comprehensive plans. Our focus is to align zoning with community priorities like housing, sustainability, and historic preservation. Residential districts include the RA, RNA, RB, and RC districts, each with different density and form standards. a lot of these got a little mixed up, so I'll rearrange them. But the mixed-use district categories are our mixed-use nodes, which is the NX3, NX5, NX8, NX10, and the DX. Our residential mixed-use nodes, which is the RX3, RX, and RX5, and our corridor mixed-use, which is the CX3, CX5, and CX8. Other districts include the industrial flex, which is the IX, and special districts such as the CM and CV. Overlay districts add an additional layer of review, especially for design, historic preservation, and flood protection. Design review is required for several overlay district areas, including entrance corridor and historic districts. The residential projects with 10 or more units must provide 10% of the units at or below 60% AMI or pay in lieu fee. Bonus height is available for deeper affordability at 50% AMI or an equivalent fee. In lieu fees are based on the average cost of the developing a unit in the Charlottesville market. For student housing within a half mile of grounds, there is no on-site affordable units, but they do have to follow design constraints. However, an in lieu fee is still required based on the value gap between the market and affordable unit. A certificate of appropriateness is required for new construction in our design overlay districts. These are the architectural design control districts, historic districts, entrance corridors, and individually protected properties. The review types include a minor historic review, major historic review, and corridor review. The Board of Architectural Review, the BAR, requires upper story setbacks to step backs to 25 feet and height reductions along the downtown mall and in other districts. Considerations include compatibility with the district's character, costs for compliance, and alignment with the comprehensive plan goals. Appeal of the BAR and ERB decisions must be filed within 10 business days. If no appeal is filed, the COA is issued after that period, and that appeal can be both from the applicant or from the public. Development may apply for special exception permits in our sensitive neighborhoods, may apply for a special exception permit to exceed the base height up to 7 stories. Applicants must include a community meeting and show how there is an additional public benefit or amenities. Current applicable areas like Preston Avenue and Cherry Avenue are zone CX3. This concludes the zoning and regulatory framework portion of the presentation. These tools are actively used to implement the comprehensive plan and guide development in a way that reflects the community's values. I'll now turn it over to Director Brown, who will walk through the current planning and zoning work plan priorities in more detail.
Hello, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you, Matt. I will speak a little bit about our current planning and zoning work plan priorities. We are currently focusing on a zoning study looking at short-term rentals. The goal is to improve enforcement by investing in software in partnership with the Commissioner of the Revenue that will enable better tracking of homestays and conducting a zoning study as well to refine existing regulations to make enforcement easier. We anticipate that these amendments will come forward in January or February of next year. We are also conducting a study of our environmental policies and regulations that intersect with our goals for housing. The goal is to develop new policy frameworks, recommendations for regulatory changes, and other investments to better align the city's regulations for natural resources with the comprehensive plan. There's a work session with City Council scheduled for November 17th to share proposed priorities and get feedback for next steps. Next slide. Other current priorities in the work plan for this fiscal year are the 10th and Page and Rose Hill planning efforts. These efforts were identified and prioritized during the adoption of the 2024 Development Code. This plan will serve the needs of the 10th and Page and Rose Hill neighborhoods by building on the adopted land use vision for this area and the zoning regulations already in place, and identify investment priorities for the next 5 years. We are anticipating a kickoff for that effort in the winter of this coming year. We are also focused right now on our development code monitoring and evaluation, as well as bringing forward targeted amendments to support technical corrections and clarifications that are needed to support the intent of regulations that have already been adopted. This process will also identify potential policy-based amendments as Tier 3 amendments that could be added to future year work plans. There is a work session with the Planning Commission scheduled for this month, and we anticipate that recommendations for these targeted amendments will be brought forward in winter of the following year. And then finally, there is a new priority that we have added to our work plan with the inclusion of the housing program as part of Neighborhood Development Services. Our team is conducting a study of the affordable housing in lieu fees as part of the annual amendments to and updates to the accessory dwelling unit manual that's required. So this study will evaluate the in lieu fee structure for student housing, non-student housing, and bonus height for greater alignment with comp plan goals, including both affordable housing production and expanded housing options. And so with that, we can move to the next slide, and staff is available for any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, is that, so, do we have questions? So, Sam, if you can kind of help as we, for comments and input, are you looking for us to comment on, like, first on the zoning regulations and then the priority work plan, or how would you like our input?
We're looking to see, are there questions? Are you in need of anything to help you in recognizing what the steps forward are? This work plan was presented to you some months back by Ms. Brown. The goal was for us to give you an update as to what that schedule is to look like, because those work sessions are now about to start. She mentioned the environmental regulations conversation is coming along with short-term rentals. Both of those will happen before this year is up. So we just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to check in, because there's so many moving parts to all these different conversations. And if there was a need to reprioritize or reorder them, that's really what we were looking for.
Got it.
And if not, then we feel like this is, again, reminding you all what the order of steps are.
Right, and so that would include, council, like, changing of the work plan to look at the zoning ordinance again. That would have to be, and so that's what we'd like to kind of first of all get your input on that. So I'll start with you, Michael. Do you have any thoughts on the work plan or changing of the work plan? It's great that we're going to be getting some information on the homestays before the end of the year. That's great. But Michael.
Yeah, just to go back to the affordable housing requirements and that split between non-student housing and student housing. If that it could just be pulled back up. If not, that's fine. But sorry, because I just think this is an important point. I think maybe, many people in the community weren't familiar with the history of this. So there's two types of fees, construction cost and value gap. And it's a little hard to read on the screen, but, the difference in those two formulas is double the amount of affordable housing payments. So student housing pays half half as much in the payment in lieu formula as non-student housing. The history of that is, at the time, the theory was for non-student housing, the goal was to incentivize building it on site, so have a higher payment in lieu fees. They're incentivized to build it on site. Student housing, the theory was there's less value for building the affordable housing payment, or building the affordable housing on site, so have a lower payment. But I think that's an important point, that for student housing, the payment in lieu fee is half of what it is for non-student housing. And that's determined by a 0.5-mile radius from campus grounds, where that formula, where, again, they're required to pay half as much in affordable housing payments. Could you just remind us again where that 0.5 miles is set from?
Sure. So the 0.5 mile radius is based on basically establishing a buffer around the definition of campus grounds. And campus grounds has been identified as all of the contiguous property owned by the university on grounds. There's a map that's available. We didn't provide it with these materials, but there is a map available on our webpage and through the GIS viewer if anybody is interested in looking at it. And then you can just imagine or use that tool, that GIS tool, to understand if you extend that line a half mile in any direction, what areas would be included.
So if that's the metric, that would include UVA hospital system buildings, correct?
So the grounds is not defined to include any of the UVA hospital system, but it does, when you extend the half mile beyond, yes, it does end up including part of the hospital system as the area where this in lieu fee would be required.
And that, where that area that the 0.5 miles starts to apply, that was a determination made by a zoning administrator. That wasn't a legislative action by city council.
The decision that the student housing in lieu fee should apply within a half mile of campus grounds was established when the development code was adopted. The zoning administrator makes a determination with every application essentially that comes in if that property is located within a half mile of the campus grounds.
Yeah, because my concern is from where I've seen it set, at least in the recent decisions, is a location that is not contiguous. Central grounds has been chosen, which is putting a very significant portion of both Fifeville and 10th and Page in that 0.5 mile radius, where in this framework the city has decided student housing is the priority for what goes there, which at least for me, was not the legislative intent of this, and has gone too expansive, especially when you look at, in our own inclusionary housing analysis, student housing is the most profitable housing type, along with senior care facilities. So, I mean, there's a very significant amount of potential payment in lieu funds for affordable housing that we're foregoing, in addition to targeting far too much of Fifeville and 10th and Page for student housing construction. But I just think that is a very important point for the community to pay attention to. Another question, so for the Tier 3 amendments in the work plan, those are really anything that is a substantive policy change. So any changes to overlays or zoning districts, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Anything that would essentially change the land use vision that's been adopted already through the comprehensive plan would be considered a Tier 3 amendment and would require a separate effort to look at, what are the problems that we're trying to solve, what would be the potential impacts in terms of benefits and burdens, who would we need to make sure we're including in any consideration of policy changes from a community engagement perspective. The time for that sort of study is significantly longer than any of the other Tier 1 or Tier 2 amendments, where we are essentially seeking to make clarifications to policies that are already well understood And we're just simply seeking to clarify what was intended.
Right, so essentially Tier 1 and Tier 2 are kind of a mix of fixing typos and kind of pretty small administrative things. Tier 3 is substantive policy things that, the community cares about. And for that tier, so the Tier 3 changes, what is your current timeline for the earliest under your current framework you would anticipate adopting any changes?
Well, we can consider the short-term rental study essentially a Tier 3 zoning study where we are doing a lot of detailed staff analysis. We are doing community engagement. We are putting together staff recommendations for Planning Commission and Council consideration. So that's something that's already on our work plan. If we conclude our environmental policy review and ordinance review, that might also include some recommendations for development code changes that essentially represent Tier 3 amendments. So those are underway. When we initiate the review of the in lieu fees for student housing and essentially the framework for how we consider affordable housing relative to student housing, that is a Tier 3 zoning ordinance amendment. So we have all of those on our work plan. We're seeking to complete those. And when we put together a new work plan for fiscal year 27, we would seek to evaluate what sort of capacity we have to add additional Tier 3 amendments. And we would look for feedback and guidance from Planning Commission and Council in terms of how to prioritize additional work plan items.
So in the current framework, it would be easily a year plus for additional.
I think that's fair to say, yes.
And last question. So in recognizing this is a matter of policy decision City Council has made, but for the 10th and Page and Rose Hill small area plans, what is the planned mechanism for being able to turn those plans into reality?
Well, that's grounded in the approach to these planning processes that the city will collaborate with the community to understand what additional needs are in areas such as mobility or financial tools for wealth creation, affordable housing tools, for example. Those are kind of the focus areas of these planning efforts. And so it would be grounded in trying to understand what the community needs and then what are the city investments or partnerships with other stakeholders, other service providers to make those recommendations a reality.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I guess one other thought there. If there are recommendations that come from that plan that are related to the land use vision in the community, for example, staff would seek to document that and understand how those sort of considerations could be addressed in future studies. So really trying to come up with a plan for what can be accomplished within 5 years and what might need then some longer term study as well.
So just a few thoughts. I mean, one on the 10th and Page and Rose Hill small area plans, one of my concerns is, from conversations I've had over the years, I think one of the things that's hoped for from 10th and Page and Rose Hill neighborhoods is through those small area plans being able to do things like the 501 Cherry Avenue project where there's a community benefits agreement that's getting a catalyst project that's involving the neighborhood from a ground up level. And we don't have a zoning in most of 10th and Page and Rose Hill that would allow that to become reality because 501 Cherry, you only have a community benefits agreement if you have a special use permit or some sort of discretionary process to require that. And I think another thing people look for is the ability to have catalyst projects where the Economic Development Authority or some entity could be involved in purchasing a piece of land and developing businesses that the community wants to see that are leading to community wealth building. And that requires a level of intentionality in our land use that I don't think we have, except in the core neighborhood overlay. So we're going to be creating a plan that can't be implemented to meet what I have heard is a lot of those neighborhoods' expectations. And that's a major concern to me. The second is obviously the question of student housing in 10th and Page and Fifeville. Not speaking about specific projects tonight, I know for tonight, but that's a broader policy question. We touched on it when we were developing the new zoning ordinance that in our own economic analysis we had done, the only housing type of 6-7 stories and above that makes financial sense in Charlottesville's market is student housing, because it is the most profitable housing type. And we, in extensive areas of 10th and Page and Fifeville and Rose Hill as well, are essentially allowing student housing by right at 7 to 11 stories, which is not just a change for the neighborhoods at the aesthetic level, but has an economic impact in terms of changing the businesses there, changing the demographic makeup of the neighborhoods, can fuel gentrification depending on the project, where I think we would be far better off to have a much more intentional strategy around student housing that's not saying don't build very large projects like the Verve, but target them in Barracks, Ivy Road, JPA, and not push that change into 10th and Page and Fifeville because of the gentrification and displacement risks. And our zoning, I don't think, is accomplishing that goal right now. And I do think we have to move to rectify that issue on a much faster timeline than a year before we get, at best, an initial study done. And I just think that's a very important change we have to tackle. And I think the community, whatever decision, a majority of city council comes to, I think the community very clearly expects us to at least have that conversation and make known, what our rationales are for making or not making any changes. And I just think that has to happen on, a faster timeline than, one, that not being in the work plan at all right now, and then two, if it was added to the work plan, it has to happen faster than just a year before study is commissioned. And I think part of that comes down to city council too. I mean, I think there are changes we can make to, alter the area of core neighborhood overlays or other changes that don't necessarily require, an outside consultant to, spend 6 months to a year studying. Just comes down, is it a change that, city council is comfortable making? And we have done zoning text amendments in the past on, I think it was done in a period of 1 to 2 months when we made a zoning text amendment to allow the 2117 Ivy Road project for student housing to get done. So there's clearly a precedent to do it.
May I just make a couple comments based on a few of the comments that you made?
Sure.
Councilor Payne? No, I think that was helpful feedback, and a number of the concerns that you raised, I think are items that could be looked at through the 10th and Page and Rose Hill plan, and also the Affordable Housing in lieu fee study and ADU manual updates. The questions of the areas where the student housing policy applies, and also the question of how you, I guess just starting with that, the question of where those, where that policy applies could certainly be looked at through the Affordable Housing in lieu fee study and ADU manual update process. And then I think that the question of, once we identify what the community needs are in 10th and Page and Rose Hill plan, you identified a number of them that you've heard through your engagement. We can use this planning process to develop recommendations for various implementation strategies that can achieve those goals. Incentive-based zoning is one approach We use our CIP as well in Charlottesville for small area plan implementation. So there's a number of different, I think, strategies that we can look at to understand how to meet community needs. So I just wanted to flag that, that I do think there's some opportunities in our existing work plan to look at some of those issues.
Right, and I appreciate that. I would just say again, and I know this is, not the consequence of decisions staff has made. This is city council decisions. But my concern again is just, if, as I expect, a large hope in those neighborhoods is for community benefits agreements, the ability to do catalyst affordable housing projects or catalyst community wealth building projects. We're going to have a process that is going to empower those communities to set goals, but without empowering them to have the leverage to turn those goals into reality. And I think that's going to create a lot of disillusionment and cynicism, and it feels like we got the order of operations backwards, where we would have to start with what would give these communities the leverage to turn their vision into reality. Again, if 501 cherry is something we want more of, that requires special use permits and discretionary decision-making, requires partnerships with Economic Development Authority, other things, to purchase land in partnership with nonprofits. And we've kind of foreclosed a lot of that possibility as I see it. So would just offer that.
Okay. You done for now,
Yes.
Michael? Okay, Natalie, you wanted to comment?
A couple questions. The short-term rental study, just to clarify, the reason why we involve the Director of Revenue in that is because we get lodging taxes from short-term rentals. But if we don't know the accurate amount of rentals we have. Oh,
Sorry, they said
thanks.
they couldn't hear.
Sorry. So just clarifying that the reason why the Director of Revenue is included in the short-term rental study is because of the lodging taxes that we get from short-term rentals. And if we are only relying on Airbnb or VRBO to tell us, yeah, this is definitely how many room nights were rented in the last year, so here's your tax funding, we have no way of double checking that. And so am I correct in saying that the software we're looking for is a way to make sure that what we're getting from these companies is accurate?
Yes, the software is basically it is a tool that surveys the internet, to make sure that all of the listings that we that are licensed in the city are actually exist. So yes, that's a short answer to your question.
Okay. And then it catches any that we are not licensed, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
then the process moving forward would be to, contact those that have not received their zoning permit and make sure that they come into compliance.
Okay, great. That sounds like it's going to be useful. Backing up a couple of slides, if you don't mind, Matt, please. I'll say when. That one. Yeah, perfect. Sorry. And this might be in the zoning code. I didn't have a chance to look it up ahead of time. Is there a timeline for when that community meeting has to take place in the requirement?
I don't have the direct, I'd need to look too, but it would need to happen, I can say prior to getting site plan approval. I just don't know if it could happen in the development plan or site plan process, but definitely before any sort of approvals are granted.
Okay. One of the pieces of feedback that I've been hearing is having that meeting earlier or more than one, so the community not necessarily, has the architectural expertise to offer input, but just they're aware of what's going on. They can ask questions and feel a little more in tune with what potentially could be coming their way. So I don't know what the timeline is for that, but just something to consider as we talk about it in the future is either moving that earlier or requiring a really early one, and then when the site plan is kind of more presentable, here's what we've got so far, sort of thing, could be useful.
Thank you.
And then, can you explain some of the rationale behind the student half-mile radius? Wouldn't student developers kind of build close to the school anyway? So why would we need the extra incentive? And or did we have a problem with student housing developers building that far outside of that half-mile radius before. I know like the end of Madison Avenue is just over half a mile away, but were there concerns about that, or just kind of wondering where that underlying reasoning might have come from?
So I can take a stab at it. I don't know if Mr. Freeze might be able to add in a little bit more, since he was involved at the more so involved in the time. But I think that the idea was actually not so much to incentivize the student housing, I've come to learn, but more so it was simply a recognition that it was a very different product type, that student housing, that large scale student housing can't actually be built in a way that could also include affordable units. Those developers simply wouldn't build the student housing if that requirement existed. And so the thought was that we couldn't require the same sort of, we needed to create an affordable housing contribution expectation that was different than the affordable housing contribution for non-student housing. And so then it was really a question of, well, how do you then figure out where you want the student housing requirement to apply? And there was a recognition that, yes, we do think that the developers would want to build that housing closer to the university, so a half-mile radius around campus grounds seemed reasonable, and that's essentially the background for how we are where we are today.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that. That's pretty spot on.
Okay, thank you for that. That definitely is helpful. So that kind of brings me to a larger issue that, I think let me pull up the slides. This might be part of the in lieu fee study or something else that we're looking at. I feel like we've talked about it before, but studying the impact of inclusionary zoning in general and or the tax abatement programs that we want to think about for large-scale development, because when you do inclusionary zoning of this type where you're requiring an additional fee per building and it's only on these larger scale buildings and not on every building, it has an incentive and disincentive program for the developers where, if they build a hotel or they build a commercial building, that's not going to have that same fee required, so their overall costs are going to be lower. And the people who are providing the apartment buildings are providing the thing that we desperately need, but then we're slapping on an additional payment required. And one of my concerns is that, a couple of my concerns are that what that does is, since it drives up the overall cost of construction, it naturally drives up the rents that are going to be charged in that building. The developers aren't just paying that and then it's coming out of their overall profit margins or their savings account. They're passing that payment on to the people who are going to be living in that space. So it naturally drives up the market rate apartments in those spaces. So that's a problem because then it's just being passed down to the tenants. It's potentially also handicapping the overall size of the developments that we want. And so yes, we get that one-time payment, which is great. Having an affordable housing fund is great. But if that overall building is smaller than what it could have been if they hadn't had to pay that extra several $million, then we are missing out on potentially regular long-term year-over-year tax revenue opportunities. And so I'm really interested in seeing what the potential tax abatement program looks like to help lower initial construction costs, to drive up that the construction of volume for the larger scale projects throughout the city. Because I don't want to be having short-term gains at the expense of long-term viability and revenue.
So I did not actually include the tax abatement study on that list of projects that I shared earlier, and I should have, because we are also, that is another new item to the overall NDS work plan, is the tax abatement study. We are going to be bringing forward our findings from that study.
Great.
In the beginning of next year. A lot is happening in the beginning of next year. And I might have misspoken, by the way, earlier. the short-term rental study, we will likely have findings and initial recommendations in the first part of next year, but we haven't scheduled a date to actually bring that to Planning Commission or Council. So just to clarify that. So I don't know, Councilor Oshrin, if you had a specific question, but I did just want to acknowledge that the tax abatement study is also something that, yes, we are also looking at.
Okay, I appreciate that, because I feel like I've read that somewhere and then I didn't see it here, so I just wanted to make sure that that
Yeah, I
was.
should have included it.
Yeah, okay. I know I'm not seeing things then, thank you.
Okay, that's it. Brian? Lloyd, do you have any?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to remember, and I frankly don't remember all of the details, but I remember as we were getting down to the sort of the finish line in 2023, we were grappling with a number of issues, and one of the issues was the question really is presented by the issues that are in front of council right now, or actually they're not in front of council, in front of the city right now. It was a question about how to balance, on the one hand, the need to get decisions made more promptly by the city for anything to go forward. Complaints about the fact that it was taking 2 years or more for projects to work through the pipeline. And one of the reasons it was argued was that there were so many steps along the way where there were discretionary choices by various city boards, and Board of Architectural Review or the Planning Commission or Council or whoever. And one of the points that was made to us was that if we want to have things done more quickly, the trade-off is we have less public input, we have less opportunities for the public to stand up and squawk. And one of the specific places where this came up, I remember one meeting where at least one of the proposals was that we allow up to 5 stories by right, but anything over 5 stories had to be by special use permit. And I had advanced that suggestion, and I don't think I got any interest from anybody in support of that. And so we wound up opting in favor of approving more density really by right, so that people in theory could know when they applied with some greater degree of certainty than they had at the time, what they could plan for, how they could kind of organize their thoughts. The result of that, of course, is, and around the same time, we were also having discussions about whether we wanted to have different rules that would apply to what we were calling at one point sensitive neighborhoods, or now there's a provision for core neighborhoods and so on, and different definitions at different times. And that sort of got shunted to the side, and we were going to confront that later through the small area plans or something. The point being that we made some affirmative decisions in 2023 that we were going to make it easier to build higher and to build more. And there are some legitimate reasons in principle for why that's a good idea. The question that Charlottesville has never gotten right, in my view, is the balance of how to on the one hand provide more student housing close to the university, on the other hand recognizing that the neighborhoods closest to the university tend to be what we would call sensitive neighborhoods or core neighborhoods, or let's be blunt, African American neighborhoods to a large extent, Fifeville, 10th and Page. And that's a trade-off that we tried to confront. I remember back in the 1980s, and that got all screwed up. And then we didn't do anything with it until about 2000, and then that's when the zoning ordinance was amended to allow ultimately for the building of projects like the Standard and so on. And we, on the one hand, thought, well, gee, that's not really a very good idea. We don't like more buildings like that. On the other hand, then we had this question of, well, if we if we make it a 2 or 3 year process, then we're making building more housing just impractical. Anyway, I say that all just to emphasize that, for better or for worse, council made some affirmative decisions at the end of 2023 that have left us in a situation where council doesn't overtly have much control over some of what's happening now. And the issue that I raised at the last meeting, in part because of the comments that folks had been making to us for a couple of months, was whether we wanted to try to revisit that and whether we could revisit that as a practical matter at this point. I'm not going to get into the legal issues associated with all of that, but suffice it to say that there are some important basic issues of what's sometimes called urbanism, urban economics, about whether we want to increase housing period, and if so, are there ways that we can balance that against the community inputs that on the one hand take time, on the other hand they sometimes end up killing projects. And I don't know what the answer right now is, except to say that I think we don't currently have the power under the zoning ordinance to do some of the things that folks want us to be able to do. B, that we affirmatively chose not to have that power 2 years ago. And I'm not quite sure, C is I'm not quite sure where we end up going forward, if we're going to go forward at all. So that's sort of the history behind all of this. As I said, we've never really gotten the balance of density, by right versus SUP and all that kind of thing. We've never really gotten that right, and I'm not sure we've got it right now, but I'm also not sure what we can do right now.
Yeah, so I just wanted to chime in some. I know that, Kelly, you had mentioned something when Michael was commenting about the 10th and Page in Roseville, that you may be doing that. You may be able to look at the affordable housing. If you can comment on that again.
Sure. So we know that one of the needs throughout the city is additional affordable housing, and there's also interest in property owners creating greater affordability on the properties that they already live through potentially the creation of an accessory dwelling unit, so not an affordable dwelling unit, but an accessory dwelling unit, or converting an existing house into a duplex. But there are challenges to small developers or individual property owners, homeowners, pursuing that sort of investment, which really allows for wealth creation. And so one of the things that I think would be interesting to look at are opportunities for additional tools in our toolbox, whether that's loan programs or there's grant programs. There's a lot of different programs that localities around the country are looking at as strategies to help facilitate the smaller scale development. And we're also, we actually just got word that in partnership with UVA, we received a grant to create kind of a design library of designs that could help these smaller scale developers and individual homeowners bring forward concepts for investment in their properties. So we're interested in looking at a lot of these different strategies to help with wealth creation and the creation of affordability in our existing neighborhoods.
Right. So, as I recall, when we were, it was 2 years ago about now, when there was a lot of meetings and discussions about, as we wanted to approve this plan by the December meeting. So we had a lot of discussion, and many of those that we said we want to get into later, like specific neighborhoods and dive into some things a little bit deeper. And that is when we came up with the work plan. We had all these to-do things list to do, and when we came up with the work plan earlier this year, it included a lot of that, based on the priorities. We have things change, and I know that I'm not sure if there was a lot of discussion during that time, UVA is planning to build some second-year dorms. They're planning to lean into that a little bit more, and that will have an impact on it. Some of the things that we're planning to do. But as far as the work plan, I think that if we can chime in some of the things that you talked about, Kelly, with that, I think that if we're going to do a major overhaul of the work plan, we just have to have like a lot more discussion on that. Because we have, I think that we're getting some of the projects that we anticipated, kind of the density that we want, but it may not be looking like what we want. So Sam, do you have what you need?
Can I actually ask one more question?
Yes.
This might be on a work plan we've gotten previously and not on this part, but one of those things that we were going to review was mixed-use commercial throughout the city. And is that still on the to-do list?
There's a long list of to-do items, and yes, that is on the to-do list. It is not on this fiscal year's work plan, but it is still on the list.
Great, thank you.
And just in response to a few points, on the inclusionary zoning payment in lieu requirements, the Housing Advisory Committee got a first look at the draft of the tax abatement program, and it was just their first look, so it's not the final word, but it was interesting. They looked at projects that pencil out with inclusionary zoning affordable housing requirements, without any inclusionary zoning affordable housing requirements, and then had a tool to play around with different abatement levels. And what they found is even with no inclusionary zoning affordable housing requirements, most projects, except for student housing, don't pencil out under current market conditions because it's just not an attractive asset class for investors when they look at the alternative non-housing assets they could invest in. In their draft tool, found that the tax abatement for inclusionary zoning would not make more projects pencil out unless the program started subsidizing market rate units, which is an entirely different question. And some of the developers on the hack said that the assumptions were actually too optimistic in terms of the rents that Charlottesville's market can bear versus the cost. Now, they didn't break down and look at student housing specifically, which is the most profitable housing type, so I suspect that will be very different, student housing specifically. And I do think the inclusionary zoning is incredibly important because what I worry about is if we look at a time period of 5 to 10 years, new market rate supply is 100% necessary, but what it will do is, again, over that 5-10-year time horizon, will lower the annual rate at which rents increase, but it won't collapse rents. So people who are already shut out of the market won't gain access to affordable housing, at least for 20 or 30 years until filtering may reach them. And I worry that we would have an outcome where housing options for young professionals are expanded, but housing options for, say, a single parent making $15 or $20 an hour aren't without inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning is a trade-off of prioritizing working class people over just housing options for young professionals, which I think is really, we all know the statistics. I think the average household income for black families in Charlottesville is about 50% of area median income. It's more than double that for white families. So the distributional impacts of these policies looks very different depending on, who you are in our community. To Lloyd's point, I guess one of the questions for council is, I would agree with you, Lloyd, in that I don't think we've gotten the mix in 10th and Page and Fifethville and Rose Hill right in terms of where student housing should go. And what I worry about is capitalism in terms of our own economic analysis found this, that 6, 7 stories and above, you're moving to different construction materials, which double the cost per square foot, which means much higher rents, which means, and there's research on this looking at Chicago and other cities, that if you double, triple height to these more expensive housing types in working class areas, you can have a diffuse small regional benefit on reducing the rate at which rents increase, but have a very localized impact in terms of strongly increasing land values, speculative investment pressure, and the induced demand to bring businesses in that are catering towards a wealthier new population that's moving in. Which doesn't mean we don't want to build more density, we just have to be very intentional about where it goes and looking at the trade-offs. And I worry that we're not getting that balance right because we're pushing a tremendous amount of change in the most expensive housing type of 7, 11-story student apartment buildings into 10th and Page, Fifethville, Rose Hill. That's what we're going to see at those heights because it's the only thing that pencils out financially. So we are going to transform these neighborhoods into areas of, by, and for students and fuel gentrification and displacement pressures, when I do think we have the ability to walk and chew gum at the same time of still getting that student housing, but targeting it in Barracks Road, JPA, Ivy Road. And I think there are some very simple mechanisms to do that through. It could be expanding the core neighborhood overlay. It could be expanding the use of special use permits, which don't stop the largest student housing apartments in Charlottesville were approved with special use permits and rezonings. They don't need to block change. And the final point I would make, just at a foundational kind of value level, is the other thing I worry about is, these neighborhoods, 10th and Page, Fifethville, Rose Hill, have a long history of changes imposed on them by government, where you have the newest idea from the planning profession is imposed on them. And it is not a bottom-up process where they're empowered to make the decisions. I think what we've heard over the past few months is clearly that the residents in these neighborhoods and in West Haven feel this is a change that was imposed on them, and they don't feel that they are empowered to have a voice that matters, that's not just superficial. And so just kind of that, because of that history, I do think it's also just, for me, kind of a foundational value that the city should prioritize of giving these neighborhoods more autonomy. Because of that history of planners who, every time they imposed a change, they thought they were doing the right thing. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't, but that core approach, I think, was a mistake. All of which say I agree with you, Lloyd, that we haven't gotten that balance right, and I guess the question for other counselors is there any other agreement to, hold work sessions or discussions to discuss zoning changes or changes to special exception permits or BAR purview in those neighborhoods to address that concern? Or is that because I think, for the reasons I outlined, I think it's an important thing for us to at least discuss and have the community understand where we're coming from, whatever decision we come to, or, is there any agreement on that point among other counselors?
Is that part of the work plan with that last item on this page?
No, as I see it, it is not on the work plan currently, as I interpret it.
I think practically speaking, I would be happy to have that because I think one thing's clear, we have a divergence of worldview is too strong a term, but we have a divergence of philosophy about this topic on council. I'm only going to be here for 2 more months, so I'm happy to participate in that. I certainly have some views I could share, but I think it would be, the timing's not great from that perspective, but I think it might be better to do once a new council is seated after the first of the year. That would be my That said, if y'all want to have such a session, I'd be happy to do that. We could incorporate the feedback from the new counselor coming on. I'd be happy to be the voice for that, whatever you think would be. I do think that it is a significant cleavage in perspective that's worth talking about at a values level. And I don't think everything's going to be solved. I don't know if there's going to come down to like a clear decision, this is the right way or the wrong way. I think it's going to come down to, all right, we have these values, we see this one way versus the other, and I think just a call is going to have to be made. I also feel like there has been enough feedback from the community on this topic that we owe it to people to have such a more direct response.
Lloyd, do you have any thoughts on, a work session on this?
Well,
I mean, essentially, this is,
no good thoughts.
You say,
this was basically like the big placeholder we put 2 years ago about
Yeah.
this topic. And now we're, like we said, okay, at some point, we're going to get down to where the rubber meets the road, and we're going to have some hard conversations about particularly these areas, so
so,
that's where we are.
yeah, I don't think it's like, I think you said something, Brian, it's one way or another. I see it more so as staff capacity to do it, and we need to, we had already said that these are, based on that time, these are our priorities, this is what we want staff to work on. And so I think that if we can schedule a work session to discuss this at the beginning of the year, that is when budget is going to be, meetings are really going to be, starting to kick in. So we have to work with Sam and Keena to get a time when, and we'll probably have to start that now, working with Jen to get a time now at the beginning, probably the first couple of weeks of the year to schedule this work session so that, we can maybe reorientate ourselves to it, but also the public to let them know where we're coming from with this, and because we've been hearing their feedback. Natalie, I don't know if you had a chance to chime in.
As someone who watched the zoning code get passed the very last meeting before I was able to be up here and have any substantive comment on it, I can appreciate wanting to save it for the newly seated council as well. That would have been nice.
So the first thing I'll say is I'd like to back up to what I'm hearing is a desire for a work session in early January. Tell me again specifically on what topic so that I can make sure that we are prepared to bring that forward, because I've heard a lot, and I was about to respond to the mayor asking, did I get what we needed? I got a lot, but I want to at least start with the work session. A work session to look at what specifically I think is what we need clarity on at this moment.
I personally would say, looking at how student housing is approached in our zoning ordinance, and as subsets of that topic, core neighborhood overlay, use of special exception permits, and BAR purview as kind of three topics that kind of fall under that umbrella of how we treat student housing.
Say that again, just make sure I got them all.
The extent of the core neighborhood overlay, use of special exception permits or past special use permits, and then the Board of Architectural Review's purview. Again, with the overarching topic being how student housing is approached, in my mind, in 10th and Page, Fifeville, and in Rose Hill, specifically.
Okay.
And I think some conversations about the in-lieu fee, I don't know if that's, would be part of what was just talked about, but the
In-lieu
difference between,
Yep. a little bit different. That's a big work session. So there won't be anything else scheduled for that one, I can tell you that now. All right.
Yeah,
And
I don't have
that calculator you mentioned that Hack got to play with, I think that would be useful for people to have and also see the resources that went into creating it.
Definitely, and it definitely will be. The consultants are kind of refining from feedback from developers, so.
I think that's pretty inclusive. Lloyd, did you have any other topics to add to it?
An additional comment I'd like to just make, because I too get questions and requests from the public, and I just want to make sure that in what we just heard is clearly a lot of differing opinions as to what the right next steps are, how to go about doing it. My job is to synthesize as much of this as I possibly can and keep us moving and make sure that I'm not missing what it is that you're asking for. So the work session is something that we can absolutely accommodate at the start of the year once our new council member is seated. So we'll make sure that I begin working with the team on this beginning tomorrow to make sure we can pull that off. As it relates to the questions that are circling at this moment, what I'm hearing is that there is not a majority action that you are ready to commit to as a body to do anything other than where we are with what was presented tonight as your work plan that was previously provided, and now we're just committing to, we're moving forward with this schedule. If that should change, I would need to hear that from a majority of you in order for that to steer us differently, because that is how we move at your request. So I'm just offering that because I do not have this internal purview that I get to decide what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. I look to you to tell me that. So I'm making that much known as well. I think what we should also, I don't want to miss the moment of just helping residents of 10th and Page and Rose Hill appreciate that while yes, there are challenges with implementing plans that are produced, the evidence of where we are today is that we are definitely trying to be more conscious of the idea that we're not doing a plan for it to sit on the shelf. We're doing a plan so that we can implement said plan. And I share that with you all as my priority for this fiscal year in our approach to how we're doing the work. Just using the same 501 Cherry idea of a catalytic project in the Fifield neighborhood, while the zoning may not be supportive of making that project happen, the cash and tax abatement are things that are making that happen. And I think we don't want to lose sight of what other tools we have in our toolbox that we can continue to make available as we move into the next neighborhood and the next neighborhood to study from a planning perspective. And while you're going to continue to have the zoning debate and conversation, maybe we'll get around to adding more of the tools to that box, but I don't want any neighborhood resident to feel discouraged by the idea that we are going to take them through an exercise. And I know Osei appreciates me saying this because she's the one leading that work, but we want to make sure that people will appreciate that, and we will continue to use what tools we have available to move forward for implementation, because it's not worth it to do a plan without some ability for us to implement. I do appreciate the comment. I just want to make sure that we don't miss that.
Yeah. So I think that you summarize where we are right now, that we're going to wait to the work session for guidance. Right now, the work plan will stay as it is, and we will wait to, the work session to see if anything changes from that. And I'll also be reaching out to Ms. Fletcher to see if she has any additional comments to add to that, what that work plan will look like. Any other comments or clarification? It seems like we have direction. Do we have closed session today, Sam? Any items?
We do not.
Okay. So this inside, if there's no other business, this will close out our, this is a work session. We'll come back at 6:30 for a regular business meeting. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Don't forget to vote tomorrow.
Yeah.